Welcome back in. Garnet Trust Hour here on the game. Tyler Head, Chris Clark along with you here in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Of course, you just heard Chris's conversation with Bengali Kamara, the new transfer linebacker, one of the new transfer linebackers for South Carolina coming over from Pitt for this upcoming season. Good conversation there. The linebacker room, and I started off the hour talking about this. One, for good reason, to be very excited about with not only what you have coming back with guys like Debo, Bam Martin-Scott, who we, of course, saw come on as the season went along last season, but you bring in two extremely experienced and veteran guys in Demetrius Knight and Bengali Kamara that have played a lot of football, been around the game for a while, that, when you look at what you lost in Stone Blanton and Pup Howard, you supplement that for a lot of experience. And, again, a deep room. You got J.R. Johnson, Wendell Gregory, those guys coming in as freshmen. Dron Willis also coming along, hopefully for taking a big step this year. This is a very deep room and one that, again, should be one of the focal points of this defense this year. Well,
this is just such an important year for South Carolina's defense because, look, I know the starting point for this season is, the schedule's hard. But look, I mean, guys, the schedule's hard every year. I mean, we have never sat up here and said, not bad. Have there been some years sprinkled in where the schedule's a little bit more favorable? Yeah. Like I think maybe one of the last times when Will Muschamp was at South Carolina, the year they won 9 games,
Was that 17?
So 17 and 18. Little bit more of a reasonable schedule that year or two. So, is this one tougher than that? Yes. But it's always tough because you're always going to play an SEC schedule. Sometimes you're going to play an out-of-conference Power 4 team. That's not always the case. And then you're going to play Clemson. I mean, automatically, that's a difficult schedule. And last year, of course, you went 5-7, so you're looking to take a step forward with that difficult schedule, going to Bama and Oklahoma on the road, hosting Ole Miss at home, playing Missouri at home, right? Even your home games, you got some top 10, top 5 potential playoff teams on there.
Sure.
But you also start looking at the personnel. Defensively, you're like, well, this is a year where, you need to be a lot better because in order to win games, number one, but you've also got a pretty experience-laden group. South Carolina in the transfer portal, era, as hot as the portal was this offseason, winter period and the spring period, the winter period especially, they did pretty well keeping the roster intact. I mean, really, they kept T.J. Sanders, Tonka Hemingway. They kept O.D. Fortune. They kept a lot of players on defense that could have easily gone somewhere else. Then they were able to sprinkle in some other acquisitions from the portal, like a Kyle Kennard, Gilbert Edmond, able to bring back a lot of their players from the secondary. They got a 5-star freshman edge, and Dylan Stewart who'll play a lot. And then, of course, the 2 transfer linebackers who were not just transfers. It's not, hey, we got this redshirt freshman or sophomore coming in. These are guys that are, 5th, 6th-year football players who have started a lot of games, who played a lot of games, and have played well and played at a high level. So, you start putting it all together, and now you look that they've built up. They're deeper at most positions than last season. I think really just on the whole as a team, but particularly at linebacker, at defensive tackle, and a lot of the body types that they have too. I mean, this was actually a big, Tyler, for years, this has been a talking point among Gamecock fans. They haven't always had that one really good linebacker, but there have been years, Sky Moore, really good linebacker, capable of being dominant. Ernest Jones, who's still playing for the Rams, he was really good. But it's a lot of times been a room where once you get past the top 2 or 3, you feel like, man, there's just not a lot of depth here. There's a lot of drop-off. Guys are playing 60, 70, 80 snaps a game.
Which we saw Debo Williams do all of last season. This year, that does not have to be the case. Right. And talking about Bengali, or I guess Gali Kamara, as he prefers to be called now, and you guys talked about, he doesn't have as much experience with like 3-3-5. I believe he came from a 4-3, as he mentioned there in Pitt. But when you look at the way that they use him, and he mentioned in practice so far, he's bounced around through those different linebacker spots. But I look at him at Pitt, he lined up on the line. He was used in the box. He was in that slot corner position as well. Like, he is a very versatile guy on this defense that you can move around to a lot of different spots. Against 6'2", 225, has that flexibility to play a couple different types of positions. I'd be very interested to see how, Clayton White decides to use him at what level of that defense.
Yeah, it is. And you could tell by listening to Bengali, I mean, he does not mind the competition. He very much has a mindset of, hey, I'm going to try to earn what I get. And I think he recognizes how many guys are on the roster that, we've talked to several of the linebackers now. And do all of them, want to start, and do they all want to play a lot? Yeah, absolutely. But I think they recognize it's a good thing. There are not players out there in the front six, front seven. Most of the time, if you actually talk to those guys behind the scenes, they may not say this in like a press conference. They don't want to play 80 snaps a game.
Sure.
Bengali Kamara laid it out there during my talk with him. He said, look, my best games at Pitt, looking back, were when I was able to split snaps with somebody, because then you're totally fresh. You think about the tempo sometimes you're playing these other teams, like a Tennessee, for instance. Yeah,
sure.
Play 80 snaps against Tennessee, you're going to be cooked, by the end of the game. So they've built up some depth. That's going to help them not only at linebacker with the level of competition, ensuring that you don't have as much of a drop-off when you're rolling guys in and out, but, of course, on special teams too. So when you look at Kamara, he's a guy that arrives here at South Carolina with a special teams background. That's how he got on the field year one at Pitt. He's played a good bit of special teams. Linebackers are typically your body types and your skill sets to where you can go out there and play them a good bit on special teams. So they've gone from exactly what you said, Tyler, where, you've got a couple guys for most of the year, Debo Williams being one of them, and then you're able to roll in and out a couple backups that aren't playing quite as much. Then by year's end, Bam Scott comes on. Once you implement the 3-3-5, he really comes on. You've gone from that to now returning your starters, still having Bam Scott, who was kind of a revelation in November, being able to implement the 3-3-5, having some different body types, and then adding in these freshmen like J.R. Johnson, Wendell Gregory, who I think especially J.R. Johnson will factor in, plus these transfer backers as well.
Well, I was going to say, and talking about J.R. Johnson, you mentioned right there at the very end when you asked him specifically, like, is this guy a dude? He's like, yeah, this guy's a dude. He certainly looks the part. We've obviously talked about the size that he brings, and, for a guy that's been around college football as long as, Bengali has, to say those kind of things about a true freshman, that gives you a lot of hope and optimism that he's going to live up, to what the hype around him is. But of course, when you look at what this room is right now, he's not going to have to come in and be, the guy right away.
Yeah.
Would you love him to get out there and have the majority of snaps? That means he's probably playing the best out of everybody in the linebacker room, sure, but he doesn't have to be that guy right out of the gate. He's somebody that, can be the future of this room, which you are going to have to supplement, with future, recruits as well as the transfer portal, because you're going to lose a lot of these guys after the season. But for where it stands right now, one of the, if not the most experienced groups on this entire team.
Yeah, it is. And it's always good, as you said, to have a guy come in to where if he earns his playing time and he's playing great, because in this situation, if J.R. Johnson plays, 10, 15 snaps a game, he's beat out some guys that have played a lot of football in order to do that, right? Maybe he just mostly plays special teams this year. That's fine. There have been far too many years, I think, where going into a football season here in Columbia, you're going, man, they cannot afford to get anybody injured. There was the one year, Shane Beamer's first year. Mm-hmm. They basically had 2 starters and a third guy, and one of the starters, Sherrod Green, got hurt. So now your primary backup is now your guy. Now you're playing 75, 80 snaps a game, not much depth to speak of. They are certainly not in that same position in 2024.
I was going to say that first year under Beamer had a litany of injuries at multiple spots.
Yes.
It seemed like when you're, pulling a grad assistant to play quarterback in the middle of the season, that's usually not a good sign there. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of the Garnet Trust Hour. He's Chris Clark. I'm Tyler Head on your Tuesday here on the game. Your read isn't until after the sports minute.
If you are dreaming of transforming your home, dreaming of that home makeover, but you're not sure where to start, do what the guys on the Takeover Hour did. Wes Mitchell called Midlands Home Renovations. They specialize in whole home, kitchen, and bath transformations. As one of the top-rated general contractors in the Midlands, you can rest assured that your home is being placed in great hands when you contact Midlands Home Renovations. From modern kitchens to luxurious baths to that sunroom add-on that you've been dreaming of, they can bring your vision to life. A couple ways to get in touch with them. Call Andrew today, 803-580-6679. Again, that's 803-580-6679 to talk to Andrew at Midlands Home Renovations, or visit their website, midlandshomerenovations.com. You can see a gallery of their work, and you can bring your home vision to life when you contact Midlands Home Renovations today.
Welcome back in. Garnet Trust Hour, Tyler Head, Chris Clark along with you on this Tuesday. Continuing to go back through a conversation with Bengali Kamara from earlier on in the hour. A big LeBron guy, as you would expect, being from Akron, of course. Did not sound like there was any kind of debate when it came to the GOAT.
We couldn't even have like a, there's no discussion to be had.
No.
It's a dead end.
Again, when you're from LeBron's hometown, I don't think there's too many people there that are going to confidently say that they think
big Jordan's
the guy. But that debate can maybe be saved for another day. But
no, thanks.
No,
I'm
probably
good.
not.
I'm not gonna.
I do think it's interesting when we talk about the veteran experience on this team. You also talked about his teammate in DeAndre Jules, who also transfers in on the defensive line. He didn't say that it had any bearing on him making this decision, but that's another guy that we look at in this already very experienced defensive line room in general, with just the guys you had coming back with Tonka and TJ Barrett and Sanders and all those kind of guys. You add in DeAndre Jules, who could have gone to the next level himself. Again, we don't know what those reps are going to look like, but that's just another experienced guy that you add to a room that was already going to be kind of the high point of maybe this entire team this year.
Yeah, I think Jules, I try not to use like hyperbole a lot or exaggerate. I think he might be the most under-discussed player on the team who deserves it, And look, one reason for that is it's understandable. I mean, Gamecock fans aren't sitting around, when's Pitt play today? They're not they're not very familiar with DeAndre Jules, right? He hasn't played here, but I do think he's going to make enough of an impact to where after the season, people who are paying attention will know who he is, right? He's just, for some reason, flying under the radar a little bit as a transfer. He's not a name that, wasn't a guy that South Carolina was really involved with during the high school recruiting process. He wasn't a huge name. He wasn't ranked as one of the top. He wasn't like Walter Nolan, who was transferring from A&M and ends up at Ole Miss and was a 5-star. It's just totally different. I think some other transfers have gotten more accolades. A lot of them, very deserved. Rocket Sanders. I mean, everybody, he plays running back, rushed for 1,400 yards in the SEC. South Carolina fans remember playing against Rocket Sanders. Like, people knew that one. But Jules is a guy, I mean, legitimately, he is getting NFL buzz based on what he's already done in college, you know? And I think if he had come out this past season, for example, he probably could have been a draft guy. And he's somebody that scouts are looking at, you know, really, really intrigued by what he looks like in the SEC. And so, you know, he did get to go through spring practice with the team, and he looked the part. I mean, he really did. Like you said, Tyler, they do have some depth built up in that D tackle room when you talk about, you know, seniors and 5th and 6th year guys. You know, Boogie Huntley's back. Tonka Hemingway's back. Nick Barrett, who's been more of a reserve guy, but he's back. And then TJ Sanders, who might be the best out of the draft eligible guys this season. He's probably the highest on the board. But Jules is slotted right in, and it creates for me some fascination of, you know, how will they split up at snaps at tackle? You know, we know they'll present some different fronts between the 3-3-5 front, the 4-man front. Got some guys that can do some different things. Jules is really a, you know, straight up just defensive tackle, I think, and that's how he was used this spring. But I think he's going to help a lot. And again, similar to linebacker, this is a situation where you can almost kind of have co-starters. You know, they had that last year with Sanders. Sanders, Boogie, Tonka, kind of 3 co-starters. I think really they're probably going to have 4 this year and be able to split snaps and play matchups and things like that, stay fresh.
Well, and that's the best, you know, thing that you can hope for. And again, knock on wood, hopefully everybody stays healthy, because that's going to benefit you later on in the season, where you're not having, you know, say a TJ Sanders that's having to go out there and play 80% of the snaps on the defensive line, because once you get into late October, early November, that's going to end up catching up with those guys. So if you can have a good rotation of, you know, 6 guys up front occupying the middle of that defense, depending on what formation that they use, then, you know, you should have some fresh bodies by the time the season, you know, is coming to an end, where those games are of vital importance, you know, maybe trying to get yourself to a bowl game or something along those lines. But again, a lot of reason to be optimistic about this entire defense, really. And again, I tip my hat to Shane Beamer and his coaching staff for going out there and addressing not just the needs that they had in the portal, but also supplementing what were already thought to be strong points on this defense to continue to bolster those rooms even more, where hopefully we're talking about an even better defense than what we saw a season ago.
Yeah, and I think when you look back at last season, you know, typically it's not just one thing. If you look at a defense or a side of the ball that had struggles, you know, you can always pull out some different things. You know, here's a reason for this. Here's a reason for this. And certainly when you look from October to November, you know, October, South Carolina really struggled. They can't create a turnover, gave up a lot of points. You think about like the Florida game, what a disaster that was at the end. But then November, they played very well. You know, didn't win every game. I mean, but you held defensively, you did about what you needed to do against Clemson. They didn't score an offensive touchdown, right? And you still lose. But in November, they played a lot better. One of the reasons for that was they switched around some personnel. They presented a new look defensively, and I think that helped. Now, they'll carry that into this season, but they've also upgraded, you know, from a personnel standpoint. They've made a lot of upgrades that we've been talking about for the last, you know, 25, 30 minutes, and that includes linebacker and defensive tackle. It's roster retention.
Sure.
It's roster acquisition.
Jeff weighs in on the text line. He says, one thing you can say about Pitt transfers, they come preloaded with the level of dislike against Clemson already. So that's very true. You're not going to have to get them too acclimated to the rivalry when that rolls around in November. That's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it. They're already familiar, and you would assume not huge fans of Clemson walking in here.
Probably not. Not too many other teams from the ACC that are too fond of the Tigers from the upstate either.
Yeah, and I don't think, you know, Jules and Kamara were obviously not on that 2016 team from Pitt that upset Clemson.
That would be impressive if they still were.
That would be a record setter, like an 11th year senior.
That'd be a Cam McCormick.
even worse.
That's right. We'll get into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on the other side. Big news on the recruiting front yesterday. A major flip to South Carolina. We'll dive into that coming up here on The Game.
All right, well, I'll tell you about our friends over at Classic Roofing, Joe Reeder and Max Sawyer. They're our friends over at Classic Roofing, residential and commercial roofing service that serves Columbia, South Carolina, and the surrounding areas. They are both longtime residents of the Palmetto State with families that live right here in the Midlands. Go check out their website when you can, classicroofingsc.com, to get more information on their services and to get a free estimate. You can also give them a call at 803-590-7870. They have a wealth of experience spanning more than 20 years, and their team of experts is well equipped to handle all of your roofing requirements, whether it's residential, commercial, or anything in between. The mission's simple: to provide you with top-notch roofing solutions that protect your property and enhance its curb appeal. That's classicroofingsc.com. Go check them out.
$11 o'clock on your Tuesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point here on, not the Extra Point, the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Guys, I host a lot of shows. It's an honest mistake. I do that at least once a day.
Do you not see us sitting here, Tyler?
I do see you sitting here. I'm looking at the rundown of the show. It says Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Honest mistake. Going to make more of those. It's okay. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, on your Tuesday here on the game.
As long as we get the Firehouse Subs part in there, I think we're good.
Can't forget that. The month of June, we talk about being...
Is it over yet?
It's not quite over yet. As being a slower period, but in the world of recruiting, things are never slow. And yesterday, some pretty significant news. I mentioned at the end of last hour, pretty big flip. Cutter Woods flips from Wake Forest to South Carolina, something that you guys going back to last week felt like was a pretty good possibility that we saw come to fruition yesterday.
Yeah, and I think this is one that also, it was kind of quietly simmering on the background a little bit, maybe even for months. Like obviously South Carolina had some quarterback targets they were going after, and that was the focus. And Cutter did what he needed to do and went ahead and committed to Wake Forest because they were prioritizing him. But, I think I picked up, this was a couple months ago, I picked up that basically Dow Loggins was still very intrigued by Cutter Woods. And then, it happens to work out that they're throwing at the 707 for South Carolina a couple weeks ago. And, Chris, I was thinking, doesn't it work out so much better if you want to get a look at a guy that is committed elsewhere if you have him on that schedule for the 7-on-7? Because then it's not like
convenient.
It's like, all right, otherwise you're having to convince Cutter Woods to come to camp. Like so for those that don't really follow it, you have like these regular camps that you can just go to as individuals. This was a 7-on-7. So, West Side is invited. They sign up as a team. And so then there's no like media coverage of like, oh, Cutter Woods is visiting South Carolina today for a camp. And then Wake Forest is like, come on, Cutter, do you really need to do that? You're committed to us. This is like, Coach, it's a 7-on-7. My team's going. Of course I'm going. And so this has become an interesting aspect in the recruiting process is hosting teams for 7-on-7. But, of course, you want these teams to have some guys you're recruiting. And so South Carolina's been intrigued. What I was told was basically when they watched him throw, they were impressed, with just the progress he has made. He's gotten a little bit bigger, gotten a little stronger, and B, just the consistency he played with throughout that camp day. It wasn't just you're throwing in a against air situation. Like, not that 7-on-7 is real ball, but just he consistently made throw after throw after throw. South Carolina took an in-depth evaluation, and then a couple of days later, they offer, and then Cutter very quickly sets the official visit. I think you can't always read into everything when it comes to recruiting, but just the way it played out, the fact that he quickly set the OV, the fact that he went on the record that he was taking the OV, and then, we reached out. We tried to get an interview on Sunday after the visit, and he very politely kind of declined. The signs were all there.
Sure.
So yeah, South Carolina gets their quarterback for 2025, and this is a guy that clearly they've been intrigued with for some time. And Chris, were you there for the state championship game as well?
I was.
Okay, and so it's interesting. These state championship games are, you can look the last 2 years now. So 2 seasons ago, Lenore Sellers just absolutely going off in a state championship game, which really he did his entire senior year. Might not have been anything different, but had a bunch of coaches watching him at that. And then this past season, Cutter Woods against Sellers' old team, bringing them back, some late game heroics with South Carolina staffers there watching in person, Chris.
And Lenore Sellers was actually there.
Sellers did
hanging out.
Post a shout out to Cutter on the Twitter X machine as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of obviously South Carolina knew Cutter Woods, knew about him. They had communicated with him even before that state title game. But that to me was kind of one of the points where we started, I think, looking at it a little bit more, paying a little bit more attention. Now, remember at that time, South Carolina's top quarterback target then was still Ryan Montgomery from Ohio, who ended up committing to Georgia in April. But, you know, watching Woods, who had been on campus at South Carolina before at camp, and in-state guy from the upstate, you knew they were familiar with him. You know, his performance in that game with Loggins watching and some other members of the staff, you go, I wonder if this might turn into something eventually. He had a big year. I mean, as a junior, he threw for 3,900 yards, I think over 40 touchdowns. He rushed for a few more touchdowns. So he put up big numbers. Then Westside going into that game against South Florence, they were down 2 scores, I think, going into the fourth quarter. And then with, I think, less than 2 minutes left, Woods helped lead them on a 78-yard drive through a touchdown pass with just not much time left on the clock. Helps Westside to their first title since, I think, the late 60s. So, you know, he turned in a really good year. But even after that, you know, we're like, hey, is this going to be something to watch? But nothing really happened, you know. I mean, behind the scenes, was there still communication, et cetera? Yes, there was. But then some other stuff happened. You know, Montgomery commits in April to Georgia over Florida and South Carolina. Woods commits to Wake Forest this past spring as well. And it looks like, hey, you know, maybe he just ends up going to Wake Forest and that's it. But then, like you said, Wes, the Gamecocks, you know, they had that background, but then they saw him again in camp. Loggins spent a lot of time watching him. He spent a lot of time talking to the family. And then by Monday, you know, we were hearing, hey, there's a pretty good chance that this is going to end up happening.
What is he's currently listed as a consensus 3-star across the board. You mentioned the great numbers that he put up, obviously leading Westside to the championship. Is there potential for him to maybe rise to a 4-star over the course of his senior year?
Yeah, I think there always is. You know, I haven't, I mean, I'll be frank, like I haven't heard anything specifically like, hey, this guy is on the verge of rising to a 4-star at this point. Now, he put up great numbers, but, you know, most of your recruited quarterbacks are going to put up good numbers like that. And, you know, I think for him, you know, to get into that 4 or 5-star category in today's game, especially if you start talking about upper 4-star, 5-star, that's where the analysts are really going to want you to be, frankly, like a Lenora Sellers, where you're just a physical, you know, monster, basically. And, you know, I think Cutter physically can run the football a little bit. He can extend plays. He's not a statue, which you can't be a statue anymore. I think he's a little bit more, you know, I think South Carolina wanted to check the box. Can he make all the throws consistently from a physical standpoint at the 7-on-7, which he did, because I think a big part of his game, and Chris, you've seen him in person actually more than I have. You've seen him in the game setting. I think a big part of his game is kind of the intangibles as well, the knowing where to go with the ball, the leadership, that X factor with the game on the line, spreading the ball around. Like, he can make the throws, but I don't think he's the guy that's going to just wow you like a Sellers or a Spencer Rattler from the physical standpoint of, oh, he can spin the football. Like, you know, if you watch Spencer throw, the first thing you
like,
say
wow.
is just like, how is he generating that much spin on the football? If you look at Lenoris, the first thing you say is, you know, this is a massive kid. And then you watch him move and you're like, you know, this is special. With Cutter, it's a little bit more of a traditional, like, he's going to have to play within the constraints of an offense to an extent, and you can win like that. But in today's college football world, I think the highest rated guys, like the top 10 quarterbacks, are going to be guys that are like chunking the ball 55 yards in the air on the run, basically.
Yeah, just incredibly elite, you know, scouting term, the arm talent, or an elite, you know, dual threat athlete. None of that is to say that Woods doesn't have a lot of characteristics that you really like, because he does. I mean, I haven't seen him play. I mean, I think he's a gamer type as well. Mm-hmm. Definitely does not shy away from those big moments. He has kind of some fire to him, which I like. You know, he's a little bit feisty and fiery on the field, you know, demonstrative. but certainly also, capable of delivering in those types of big moments. So, yeah, I mean, I think, look, this is a class where South Carolina wanted to take a quarterback. It's interesting because if let's say they had not offered Cutter Woods, they could have, maybe they find another high school quarterback, but maybe they go to the portal, for additional depth in the offseason. But now I think this is an ideal situation because you're bringing in a guy. He's not going to be under pressure to come in and immediately be the guy as in year one. You don't have that. He can come in, he can develop, learn the system, hone his craft, but he brings, especially as an in-state guy, I think he brings a lot of things to the program.
I think you can always tell from the reaction of other people too, like in, I would say the community, but really it's bigger than that, kind of throughout the football community within the entire state, because all these guys are more interconnected than ever. But just seeing some of the guys, I mean, I had picked up basically going into the official visit that Cutter had already been talking to some of the guys that were already committed to South Carolina that were going to be on campus that weekend as well. Like this is a kid that the other prospects in the state, they know him, they respect him. I think they respect his game. I saw a video posted like Mazio Bennett and Cutter played ball together back in like 12 under football and won a championship together. Like, can you imagine facing off with those two guys? But in that community, especially in that kind of in Chris's neck of the woods, up that way, Anderson area, then just the upstate in general, he's very well known, very well respected, a kid that has developed a reputation as a quarterback, like as kind of being the guy, being that leader that you want at that position. And so I always look at the reaction. Also part of the Ramon Robinson coaching fraternity at that position, or quarterback fraternity at that position, I would say. And so all those guys pull for each other, and I think it does speak to a little bit about kind of just the reputation he has created for himself in that community.
We'll see what this means for the South Carolina quarterback room going forward. Also, a reminder, coming up on Thursday from 9 to 12, we're going to be out at Firehouse on 542, Knox Ave Drive out there in Casey, broadcasting from 9 until 12. It's the Gamecock Central takeover of Firehouse in Casey, and that's coming up on Thursday. We'll dive into more conversation about Cutter Woods, what it means for South Carolina's quarterback room coming up. It's Gamecock Central takeover hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Tuesday here on The Game.
All right, everybody, you've heard me tell you about goal line framing for over a year now. And as you probably know by now, Kendall and Joni are massive Gamecock fans, and they want to welcome home all 4 new head coaching hires at South Carolina. And also at this time, offer 25% off any framing purchase of any sports-related print or items. Just say that you heard about it here on 107.5 The Game. Of course, if you want to head on over there in store, it's 511 12th Street, West Columbia. Also, you can just give them a call if you have questions, or you want to go ahead and set something up. 803-739-1337. In store, you can check out their art gallery, home decor, furniture, and gift items. Also, whatever it is you want to get framed up, diplomas, original artwork, canvases, jerseys, flags. They can take care of any and all that for you. Again, that's our friends over at Goal Line Framing. That phone number one more time, 803-739-1337.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, West Mitchell, Chris Clark. Along with you on this Tuesday. Appreciate everybody tuning in on the 107.5 Game app, as well as the Game TV, sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media. Want to hit a text from our Firehouse Subs text line, 803-404-6100. Michael weighs in and says, to me, Cutter's attributes sound a lot like Connor Shaw's. Is that accurate?
I think you give Connor the edge in the running department.
Yeah, I would too.
Connor, maybe from an intangibles standpoint, Michael. By the way, I appreciate you putting your name and not being a nameless texter. Pet peeve of mine. But also, Cutter's a good bit taller than Connor, right? Or tall, maybe not a good bit.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, I was gonna say define good bit. Like, is that an inch or two? Something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, Connor's what, 6'1"?
I know back in the day, Connor told me he was 6'2" when he was in high school.
Well, Cutter's 6'2.5".
So there you go.
We'll
But
give Connor 6'1".
Eyeballing them too,
Yeah, Cutter's a little.
Cutter's got some height to him.
Yeah,
I feel like he's grown too.
Connor was listed, by the way, USC bio as a senior, 6'1", 209. Cutter's about 6'2.5", 210. So yeah, I mean similar. I think
But Connor was dubbed as like, this guy's an athlete. I mean, Connor was recruited by Georgia Tech to play triple option
quarterback. Yeah, for sure.
Connor developed into the passer he ended up being.
I mean, as a high school senior at Flowery Branch, Connor rushed for 800 yards and 17 touchdowns. So they ran him a good bit more. And certainly, you look at some of the runs he had at South Carolina. I mean, I can see some carryover in terms of the characteristics there.
I appreciate the question, Michael. Again, 803-404-6100 for the Firehouse Subs text line. So now that you have a quarterback committed for the 25 class, obviously Sellers is going into his redshirt freshman year. Dante Reno comes in as a freshman. You got Ashford. You got Davis Bevel out of the transfer portal. You got Landon Duckworth in the 2026 class. How does this shape up for the future of this quarterback room as a whole, that you have another class bringing in a quarterback here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what you want. You want to bring in a guy every single year, frankly. Even in today's college football world where you do tend to lean towards transfer portal at quarterback. And frankly, if you end up having too many guys that can play, you have the portal affect you the other direction, and you're going to lose guys. Like, that's a fact of the matter. But if you're going to build any depth, if you're going to kind of continue to put yourself in a position to, if one guy leaves, you bring somebody else in, or if somebody gets injured, you have to try to build depth. And I think one thing that stands out to me, we saw how difficult it was to bring in a transfer portal quarterback, even with Lenoris throwing 4 passes last year.
Yeah.
But the buzz of, hey, this guy's probably the guy.
Everybody told us we were making too much of Lenoris throwing a pass against Furman or something, but the other quarterbacks are like, well,
that was a 50-yard bomb. It's a pretty good throw.
I mean, that's a great throw against air, honestly. Like, just to be...
Yeah,
you making that throw, Chris?
Absolutely.
I mean, he dropped that thing.
It was incredible
in there.
But I was firmly tongue in cheek. I mean, of course, the other, as we said when that's come up in the past, it's not a couple throws or a run in a game. It's the entire picture of it, which everybody around the program has been seeing for a while.
Yeah. So, my point being, I think you still, especially in-state guys, you gotta give yourself a chance. And if you're gonna build depth, you take these guys, I think, and then what does the room look like next year? What does it look like 2 years, 3? Who can really say? I mean, I promise you, there's schools still recruiting Duckworth. Like, this is a 2026 prospect. So, and I think South Carolina will keep recruiting quarterbacks too. Like, you're not gonna just shut it down, in my opinion, for 2026 and be like, hey, we're not going to talk to anybody else. You start seeing some 27 offers go out at that position, which tells you where we are in terms of how early things start these days. But, I think for South Carolina, you feel pretty good about the room, but a lot of it in my opinion, hinges on Sellers being who we think he is. Like, you judge unless you have landed the guys like maybe a Georgia has, like, unless you're just landing the absolute no doubters. You got to judge your quarterbacks 2, 3, 4 years down the road on how they actually go perform, I think.
Yeah, I think it's if you're recruiting to bring in guys to develop behind your perceived starter, your starter, that's exactly the approach you take. If you get to a point, let's say we get 3 years down the road, and Lenoris Sellers is moving on to the pros, which I think we all think will be in his future if it keeps going this direction. And then you've got, okay, here's, Cutter Woods and Dante Reno and whoever else may be on the roster at that point. You might look at it and say, all right, this guy, it's his turn to step in. The staff could look at it, depending on what that room looks like. It's really hard to say 2 or 3 years from now, especially in this new era. And they may say, we need to go out and get a portal quarterback. Well, that portal quarterback, you're probably judging a little bit more on, can this guy come in and be the guy? The third option is kind of what South Carolina did this offseason, in that Lenoris is going to be the guy. That's everybody's expectation, in the post and after the season. Hey, it's going to get turned over to Lenoris. But you do need competition. You need more depth. You go out and grab Davis Bevel as a PWO from the portal. You go out and grab Robbie Ashford from the portal. Yes, they did have a legitimate open competition. I think they, to some degree, they'll continue that. Expectation was still that Lenoris would be the guy. So I think you just have to put the quarterbacks as you recruit them in the proper context. In this class, you weren't going out saying, all right, you got to go get a freshman quarterback that can play. You're not going to go into next offseason saying you got to go get a portal quarterback who can step in and play. It's important in 2024 and beyond, in this new era of college football, that you keep it in the proper context.
Yeah, and for what it's worth as well, you're getting another guy that's staying in state, from Anderson, obviously, and, not going across state lines to a place like Wake Forest. And again, we'll see what his, potential ceiling is as far as a star rating, what he can do in his senior year as well. But, Coach Beamer and staff have already obviously done a really good job of keeping guys in state up to this point, and just another name to add to that list with Cutter Woods.
Yeah, they seem to have been pretty focused on, all right, if there's a guy we're further evaluating, do we lean more towards being like conservative and not offering these guys, or do we lean a little bit more in terms of aggressively just offer, hey, he's in state, we're pretty sold on him, let's go ahead and offer. They've kind of leaned that way for the most part in this class. And, ultimately in today's college football world, you can look at it two ways. We've talked about this. You can look at it two ways. Do you get a little bit more selective in who you offer because, we can just go to the portal? Or do you get a little bit more aggressive in who you offer because, well, if a guy comes in and doesn't pan out, they're going to transfer out anyway. So you're better off giving a guy a chance in your program as opposed to being like, going and putting yourself in a spot to watch him go to Wake Forest, continue developing, and then maybe he goes to Wake and, throws for 4,000 yards or something, and then you're like, we're idiots. We had him here. We could have taken him. We could have landed him, and we didn't. And so I think that's something, as the rules have changed, as the just sort of culture of college football in terms of what guys are doing for the most part, the trends, I should say, as they adjust, so do staffs as far as their decision-making.
So again, Cutter Woods committed to the 2025 class, and South Carolina obviously continuing to build on what that class is going to be as we get closer and closer to them signing coming up in December. We will switch gears over to an article that came out the other day, a opposing coach with some harsh words, some criticism to Coach Beamer. We'll hit that coming up. It is Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Tuesday here on The Game.
All right, if you're hungry like I am at 11:28 Eastern here on the Takeover Hour, let me recommend our friends over at Firehouse Subs. 14 different locations all around the Midlands, and I'm already extremely excited about being there on Thursday, Knox Abbott Drive location in Casey. We will be out there from 9 to noon. Come by and say hello to us, but most importantly, get yourself a delicious Firehouse Subs. If you can't wait until Thursday, I don't think I can wait. Do like I'm going to do, firehousesubs.com, or get yourself the Firehouse Subs app. You can earn yourself rewards on future purchases by using the Rapid Rescue to Go. Makes it super easy to order a delicious Firehouse Sub, and it will be waiting on you when you arrive at the store. Again, firehousesubs.com or the Firehouse Subs app. Avoid the wait. Order online by using the Rapid Rescue to Go. Check out Southern Roots with the Cuban Twist, the barbecue Cuban sub. It's here for a limited time only. Firehousesubs.com.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, West Metro, Chris Clark along with you on your Tuesday. Reminder, Craft Beer Card is back. You can spend $30 a brewery at 12 different craft beer locations. It's a $360 value, all yours, for just $79. Go online to 1075thegame.com. Click on the Sweet Deals tab to purchase yourself the Craft Beer Card. We are in the midst of talking season. There's a opposing coach is talking pretty negatively about Coach Beamer in South Carolina. This is via Lindy's Sports Magazine. This anonymous coach said, I think Shane Beamer's on the hot seat. He had some issues with the portal, NIL. I don't think Cocky, which is his nickname for Beamer, is very happy right now. Shane Beamer's first head coaching job was in South Carolina. Beamer wasn't ready for that. You can tell by the way he handles his press conferences. He's had a few big wins, yes, but I see that program as dead in the water. Some pretty scathing words for this coach that doesn't seem too fond of Beamer here.
Who we think this guy is?
So we investigated this yesterday.
Investigated it?
Yes.
You do like some linguistic, like trying to trace how people talk or something?
Well, when you kind of break this down a little bit, the press conference thing stands out to me because how many opposing coaches are paying attention to what other coaches are saying in press conferences, unless you yourself were either there for the press conference or around when these press conferences were happening. Perhaps this is somebody that has been in this locker room before.
Every coach generally says, I don't pay that much attention to that. I don't say every coach. A lot of them say they don't pay attention. Everybody that says that pays a lot more attention than they say. All of them. You know, they will go speaking of press conferences, they will go in a press conference and act like they don't know what holiday it is. Mm-hmm. They don't know what day it is. They don't know what, this particular thing going on in the world. But if you called them after that,
sure,
they would be like, hey, did you see Eli Drinkwitz's press conference? Like they see more than they let on.
Let's add a little more context to this. This coach went on to say, one thing Beamer did that was really smart, he brought back Sean Elliott. He's beloved by South Carolina people, coached there for a while. Many thought he'd have been a better head coach than Will Muschamp or Beamer. Sean will get the locker room right where Shane lost the locker room last year. So again, who has insight or who has knowledge on what's going on in the locker room? I'm not saying it's former assistant, but strong possibility that it could be.
Well, who could that be?
Justin Stepp, Montario Hardesty, which Montario Hardesty does not have a current coaching job right now.
Let's start. We are on air here. Let's not start throwing.
I'm giving you plausible answers.
Let's not start throwing names out there. But here's what I struggle with. How did they lose the locker room last year?
I don't know.
That. I mean, they were. Let's rewind. Let's not reinvent history. South Carolina was sitting at 2-6. Mm-hmm. That would have been a perfectly good time to lose a locker room. And in football, when you have 100 guys trying to pull in the same direction, you're going to have disagreements. You're going to, winning cures all, losing exposes all a lot of times. But they were 2-6. And they got themselves up off the ground, rallied, and put themselves in a spot to go to a bowl game. Like we've seen not that 6-6, if they had been able to get there, not that 6-6 was what they wanted to be, but how many teams have you seen start out 2-6 and then the train just run straight on off the tracks? Like, it's just over.
Seen it here.
Like, everybody just gives up, essentially. And they would never say in the moment they gave up, but then 10 years later when you saw them at the Gamecock Central kickoff party, they'd be like, oh, yeah, that team gave up. You know what I'm saying? Nobody admits that stuff.
That's right.
In real time. But they bounced back. They won 3 straight, and then just couldn't do anything offensively against Clemson. But we're in a position to at least have an okay season. This, to me, for one, I question where they even get these quotes from. And I know we use anonymous sources, so I can't be like, anonymous sources mean nothing.
Yeah, sure. But
I do question which coaches are talking to Lindy Magazine. And who I also wondered who added the parentheses on cocky. Was that on 3? Were you reading it directly from Lindy?
I was reading it from the On 3 article. Griffin McVeigh that wrote the article. So I'm not sure if he's the one that added it in that context
did On 3, or not. Who, yes, we are part of the network. Did he add that?
I don't think.
Did Lindy add that?
I'm not sure, but either way, it's not a correct citation. because nobody, it says nickname for Beamer. Beamer doesn't go by Cocky. And I think the person was trying to make a joke.
The person
The
saying
coach was trying to
Cocky's
say
not.
the mascot is not happy
Yes.
right now.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. Yeah, I mean, I don't look, and I was telling y'all about this during the break. You know, this type of thing. Brian Harsin, the former Auburn coach, a while back, responded to an anonymous coach comment that was actually talking about the Auburn roster, and it took a little jab at Brian Harsin's Auburn roster. You know, Harsin, I think he deleted this tweet, but he was like, coaches don't make these comments. They focus on their problems and their programs only. Coaches won't hide behind anonymous. He'll say it publicly and with authority. And I'm like, after I saw that, I was like, well, that shows why Brian Harsin's not at Auburn. If you're that out of touch, like,
Yeah.
have you ever talked to any other SEC football coach? Honestly, I mean, they talk about each other all the time.
And if you give them,
It's what it is.
If you give them the cloak of anonymity, where nobody's going to find out who
Yeah.
says this, I mean, they say whatever they want.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm Beamer, I'm bashing all the other coaches in this thing too.
Yeah, that's right.
Like
Yeah.
that program is built on a house of cards. Like
I think that, you know, and this obviously got a lot of discussion and a lot of play. I mean, if you wanted to, even if you wanted to say something like it started off, I think Shane Beamer's on the hot seat. Like you could sit there and say, well, no, he's not, or yes, he is. Like that, okay. I mean, that might be this coach's legitimate opinion, but some of the things that were said by a couple of the coaches were kind of odd. Like you said, Wes, the losing the locker room thing. Just kind of odd. The, you know, he had issues with the portal and NIL. It was almost like you just looked at a scholarship breakdown and saw, well, okay, 20-something players left via the portal without the context of almost all the guys that left, if not all, didn't really project to play a big role this year.
or they're just literally talking about Juice Wells, and that's like
That could, yeah, that exactly could have been that
one guy.
one player
Yeah.
that they're talking about. So, you know, I don't generally have a problem with this type of thing. Even sometimes they're entertaining. Sometimes there's some truth in some of them. You know, if somebody had pointed out, well, they need to have a good year this year. Or here's a problem. Here's a problem. Okay, that's fine. But some of these are just a little bit off to me. Like some of the criticisms were not quite valid.
there is a coach at Missouri that has App State ties, and Sean Elliott used to coach at App State, and this guy seems to really like Sean Elliott.
Oh.
Just saying.
And I don't think my sense is that Eli Drinkwitz and Beamer probably don't like hang out on the weekends.
Not exchanging Christmas cards.
Their Christmas card exchanges. That was the most speculated coach, actually, by the way.
Well, remember the podcast question to Beamer about which other coach he would punch? And people just, most speculated guy was Drinkwitz.
Well, he has the most punchable face.
Yeah, so I don't know.
I mean, I'm sitting here trying to read
This is some talking season stuff right here.
It's why we're talking about
I'm
it
reading
on
these
June the
comments in
25th.
Drinkwitz's voice, and I can make the leap easily. That is him. I could see him saying, I don't think Cocky's very happy. I can see that.
It does strike me as the guy that would say, you know, we stand on business, Josh, and then immediately run the other way like you did to Hypa last year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
that's
so awkward.
very awkward, very forced.
Cringe.
Which-
Have
cringe,
you
yeah.
seen the clip of him playing the guitar with the recruit that's
I have.
made its rounds?
I don't want to.
You
Yeah.
hadn't even seen it, Wes?
No, no.
Don't
Yeah,
look at
you
it.
Might, you might die of cringe. It's pretty bad.
It makes the Brian Kelly. Remember the Brian Kelly?
The dance.
See, how could I forget? Yeah.
It makes that like look like Michael Jackson or something back in like Thriller era Michael Jackson.
That's pretty accurate,
It's
I would
just-
say.
It's really bad.
But you know, very pointed criticism for Shane Beamer from whoever this coach is, and I agree with you guys. I don't think anybody's looking at this season as saying, "Well, Beamer's on the hot seat." And again, as I brought up yesterday, yeah, if they go 0-12, then we'll have a difficult conversation. But I don't think Beamer's in trouble of losing his job where we stand right now.
No, and I think, well, to the point you're making, in any like we were talking about last year, if you're 2-6, and then if the thing had just ran completely off the tracks, if you look back, Will Muschamp was actually not on the hot seat going into the COVID year, really.
In reality, yeah.
Yeah, but then the way the year played out, he was. So any coach, frankly, in today's college football world, any coach can be 12 games away from a lifetime extension or the hottest seat you've ever seen. Like that's just college ball. You're not on the hot seat until you are. You know, it's like it just that is the life of an SEC coach in 2024.
You're either getting extended or fired.
Very true.
Like, not much in between, really.
Yes.
Well, we had the end of the 2023-2024 college sports season last night with Tennessee taking home the national championship in baseball. We'll recap that coming up next to wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
strike. Burton needs a bolt. Swing and a miss. And for the first time, Rocky Top reaches the mountaintop of college baseball. They are the World Series champions.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you. That was a call last night on ESPN. Tennessee taking the 6-5 victory in Game 3 of the College World Series final to claim their first national championship as a baseball program. For the first time since 1999, the number 1 overall seed going in ends up winning it all. Texas A&M sure made it interesting last night, but again, Tennessee, by far one of the best teams throughout this entire season, ends up claiming the national championship.
You know, baseball is really a sport where a lot of times the best team does not win. And I actually thought, and this is more through the lens of what we saw from South Carolina, like watching South Carolina play a lot of these teams, I kind of thought maybe the best 2 teams made the final.
Mm-hmm.
And these 2 teams are loaded. If you're gonna make it, you've got to, in today's college baseball world, you've got to be able to have depth to your lineup in terms of hitting. You've got to play defense, and you've got to have some arms that are future MLB arms. And, you know, Tennessee had to sort of piece their staff together a little bit to start this year. Had some injuries, but they were just so good top to bottom as far as the way they hit and just sort of keep their pedal down. I think that they probably truly were the best team, I think. And now, if you wanted any more evidence about how hard it is to win in the SEC compared to 10, 15, 20 years ago, now add in another team in this conference that can invite a recruit to their campus and point to a trophy case that has a national championship trophy in there. And so they already were rolling whether they won this year or not, but this just gives them even more momentum. They have a young coach. They have excitement over there. I saw they're upgrading their stadium in a major way. I mean, Tennessee, in my opinion, they appear to be here to stay in the SEC, and that just makes life even more difficult for South Carolina.
Well, and like you said, this is a program that had been to Omaha multiple times already and come close to getting a national championship and finally able to put it all together. And yeah, again, Tony Vitello, still very early on in his coaching career, obviously going to get a lot more money out of this national championship with his extension that he's already signed. And this is a program that you're going to have to deal with. Again, we're talking about South Carolina trying to get back to Omaha themselves. This can be one of those programs you're going to have to get through to get there over these next couple of years.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point that you made, Wes, about how hard it is to win. I mean, A&M was rolling through the NCAA tournament, you know? And I mean, they and Tennessee struggled in game 1 of this series. A&M had not lost a game in Omaha, and then Tennessee came from behind in the series, won 2 straight games, and now they're the champions. And guys won 60 games this year, which is
that's insane.
That's hard to do. But yeah, I mean, it is a different landscape overall. And look, this is not. It's just context. It's not any type of excuse or anything like that. South Carolina, the reason that Paul Maneri is now the coach at South Carolina and that there's been a couple coaching changes is here in Columbia since Ray Tanner hung it up and went to go be AD is because South Carolina hasn't been back to Omaha. It is still very attainable, even in this current environment, because look at what Tennessee did, right? They were not good when Tony Vitello got there. He had never been a head coach. He'd been an assistant. One of his stints was at TCU with Jim Schlossnagle, who's now head coach at Texas A&M. He had been an assistant at Missouri, which was not a great program when he was there as an assistant. And then, of course, he was at Arkansas with Dave Van Horn. And so he was always a good recruiter for Tennessee. You know, you're hiring a first-time head coach, so that's always kind of seen as a risk. But he rapidly improved them and now has them at the top. So, like you said, Wes, it is another team. You look at Texas, you know, coming into the SEC, they've just dismissed their coach. It figures they'll probably hire a really good coach. They'll probably continue dumping resources into the program. So it is hard, but it can still be done, especially for a program like South Carolina that has You're not going from we've never really been good to let's try to be really good. You're going from we have been elite in the past. We've still been pretty darn good at times. Now let's try to take the next step.
Well, and as Wes mentioned, it's never been harder to win in the SEC. And you add another program with a national championship now in Tennessee. Like I said, Texas is going to be, looking for a new head coach now after firing theirs the other day. Oklahoma was obviously a team that made it to the postseason as well. So it only gets tougher next year, which again is why you bring in a guy like Mary that has the track record, has a history in Omaha to hopefully bring South Carolina back to that point. But again, easier said than done.
Yeah, it can be done. I just think you have to, as a fan, have the needed context. That doesn't mean your expectations shouldn't be to win at all. It absolutely should be. It should be to get to Omaha. But I think the reason that context helps is that you can't expect to be at the top of this league every year. Even Tennessee just won the thing. It's very hard to win one and then come back and do it again, even if you return a bunch of guys, just because you a lot of times lose a little bit of that edge that you have when you're chasing something that has never been done before, and you go into now you're just trying to repeat, and you're now the hunted, basically.
Folks on Rocky Top sure are happy, and that concludes the 2023-2024 college sports season, as we are now, 6-7 days away from football season kicking off for South Carolina as we navigate through the dog days of summer. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with myself and Terry Ford up next here on the game.
All right, guys, before we get out of here, let me tell you about one of our great new sponsors. It is Midland's Home Renovations. They specialize in whole home, kitchen, and bath transformations. If you are wanting to take that vision for your home and turn it into a reality, you can call them today or just head on over to MidlandsHomeRenovations.com. If you go on there, you're going to find everything you need to sort of see what they're all about. And from modern kitchens to luxurious baths to that sunroom add-on that we've all sort of dreamed about in your home, they're going to take what you're thinking of and then help you take it to the next level and, of course, bring it into reality. 803-632-4620 is the number. Or, again, MidlandsHomeRenovations.com. If you go on there right now, right in the middle of the screen, you're going to see Get Free Quote. Click that button.